Hearing was held earlier this evening to discuss the Springfield Regional Justice Center proposal. The proposal is to create a new building replacing the Roderick Ireland Courthouse. Western Mass News reporter Addie Patterson joins us live in studio with more details. Addie?
Abby, several local leaders and residents showed up to tonight's meeting to learn more about this project. I spoke with city officials tonight who say this proposal is much faster and affordable than the current plan to get a new courthouse in Springfield.
This proposal from the city's perspective is exceedingly creative, and it's responsive to the immediacy of the need for a new courthouse in the city.
On Tuesday, a public hearing was held in Springfield discussing the city's Regional Justice Center proposal. If approved, the project would consolidate Springfield's current court operations from 2 buildings into 1. The project would require the Commonwealth to request proposals from a long-term lease to either build a new facility or renovate one of the existing buildings for court operations.
Ultimately, that lease would be with a private development entity that would own the building, as opposed to what was originally proposed was that it would be state constructed.
Western Mass News spoke with Timothy Sheehan, Chief Development Officer with the City of Springfield, ahead of Tuesday's meeting. He tells us the project would not only speed up the process of getting a new Roderick Ireland Courthouse in Springfield, but it would also be very cost-effective.
It's going to expedite the timing of the construction of the project, and also over a 10-year window save the Commonwealth $82 million.
But what does this proposal mean for employees working inside the courthouse right now? In past years, toxic mold was found inside the building. It's been linked to dozens of cancer cases, and an additional 5 people who worked inside died from ALS. Western Mass News spoke with attorney Laura Mangini following last week's virtual hearing on this proposal. She tells us that even if the proposed project gets approved, employees will still have to work inside the Roderick Ireland Courthouse location on State Street until the new courthouse is rebuilt. The potential start date for that construction likely wouldn't be until 2026.
That's still a year and a half out before they even begin to build. And so people at the courthouse are stuck in this courthouse that we know has cancer-causing mold until the building is done.
If you were unable to attend tonight's public hearing, the public is invited to submit written comments on the proposed project via email by Saturday, January 11th at 4 p.m. That email address can be found on our website, westernmassnews.com. For now, reporting live in studio, Addie Patterson, Western Mass News.